How's everybody doing?
How are you doing?
Hello.
How was Thanksgiving?
I eat all the carbs. I eat all of them. I don't know what you all ate because I ate all of the carbs. Okay, so we're in the home stretch here. I'm recording, but we will, and I'm also broadcasting on Zoom if you want to hop on there too. Streaming, whatever I'm doing. And we got 2 more classes to go. We got today, and then we got. So let's take a look real quick at sort of our schedule, and just sort of do some house cleaning before we jump into the lecture today. So our course schedule, we are in week 14 now. Week 13 was Thanksgiving. I feel like I need to do a little bit more balancing in this class. I really feel like we probably should have jumped into rigging a touch earlier, just so we, not necessarily because I don't think we have enough time, it's because they were predicting snow yesterday, and if that would have happened and knocked us out of today's class, we would have been in a tight spot. Right? Do I?
Probably got notification for snow this evening, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Either way, luckily there's videos for all of that. If any of that does happen, and we have to miss a lecture for that, like in the future, or like we have one more lecture to go, but it's not necessarily a technical lecture. It's more of a information session. But if that happens, we have the videos to kind of back up on, and so that'll hopefully like save our butts there. So how many of you feel like you are? If we look at this schedule, we have week 14 today, right? Or this week. We have today's class, we have Thursday's class, and then next week is finals week, which means we have no classes except for the day we come to present the final, right? So how many of you feel like you're kind of a little behind where you need to be right now, right?
I haven't started modeling.
You haven't started
No,
modeling.
time to do
You
that
are
today.
3 weeks behind.
He says it.
No, it's like, no, you're, I guess, really 2. You know,
Well, we started
No.
modeling.
So, that's all right. That's how this is. I understand how the last few weeks of class is, and that's why I would say to watch out for, like, if you're feeling like you've been procrastinating a little bit, you're not the only one. Which means the day before your final is due, there's not going to be a place to sit in here, right? Like, you're going to come in at 8 o'clock and be like, I'm just going to crank this out. And one person is going to be camped out on 6 computers, and like every room is going to be full, and everybody's going to be crying and freaking out. Like, plan ahead so you don't have to be one of those people, right? No matter how much I scale the class down, no matter how, I literally took out an entire project from this class, and I guarantee you there will be at least 1 or 2 people who pull an all-nighters for the final. So it's, no matter how much time you have, the project will expand to fill that time. And so what I would say is just try to budget that. Yeah.
Is it due at the end of next Thursday, or our class or final time next Thursday, or before?
Well, it's at the beginning of it. So basically what our final time is really just going to be a critique day. We're going to open every one of them up. We're going to look at them. It's a show and tell day. So it's not like we're going to come in here and work and you have to turn it in as if that were part of the test day. And that's how most of your finals will be in digital media. So I sent out a couple of emails. I've had you in class fill out your SAIs. So far, 15 out of 25 people have done that. So you have about 3 days left to fill those out. The only reason I'm bringing those up is because one of the questions in there is, what would you do differently, or like what advice would you give someone else who's taking the class? Like, by and large, the most common answer I get is time management. Start early. Put more time into it. Don't waste my time doing other things. Work on it. Like, it's always put more time into it. So here we are in sort of that home stretch. I would say, like, just kind of budget for that. I know Like Mandalorian is awesome, but it'll still be there in 2 weeks, right?
Sure.
That's why I'm waiting to watch it then and like finally figure out what all this Baby Yoda talks about. I know it sounds horrible. It was.
When everyone's finished their robot, man, I gotta get me one of those.
Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So
We lost track.
It's true.
So, one of the things here that's a little different in this schedule is you'll see that I have this like growth mindset thing listed on week 15. That's what we're going to be doing the discussion on. We're actually going to be talking about that next class period. So I have sort of a little lecture that I'll give. It's not going to be more than an hour. It's probably about 45 minutes. I have a PowerPoint and everything. But it's a lot of fun because you get to see how much I sucked at this at one time. So basically that's what it's called. Everyone sucks at first. So the last couple of things I would chat with you about. If you get a chance to fill out those SAIs, I would really appreciate it. It's good feedback for me to know how to make this class better. And this is one of those classes that I'm really trying to make work well because other people have to teach it too, and I want to be able to pass off some of the stuff that we're doing in here to other teachers. So a couple of other things that I wanted to mention to you. Many of you have already done this. So I'm log in here and get this. Where's it at? Oh. So, I know that several of you took advantage of this at midterm, but this week we are having the final portfolio presentations for the graduating seniors. So, how many of you went to the midterm portfolio reviews for that? All right. So if you did that, make sure that I have some way of knowing that you did that because you get extra credit for that, right? The place to put that, ETSU E3, GM classes, Greg, POA, submissions, and there should be portfolio extra credit. So you see that there's a lot of hands that went up. There are only 2 items in there. The things that you can put in there, so if you could have went, I didn't know it, I didn't memorize that, you wouldn't get the extra credit unless there's something in there to tell me that. So the things you can do is post a selfie of it, or if you forget to take a selfie, you can write up sort of like your own thoughts about it, just like a paragraph. What did you get from it? What is something you learned from it? What did you think? Like, were there any of them that you were impressed with? Really just take a couple minutes, write something up. Now, if you didn't get a chance to go, it's happening again this week, right? This one is you'll get to see more polished work. This is also the one that everybody is freaking out about. And that's because this presentation decides whether they graduate or not. Right? So it's a very tense presentation for some of them. Some of them are like, nope, gonna ace this, I got it, right? So the cool thing about it is you get to come see these presentations. We kind of changed the schedule a little bit. For the midterm, how we did it was on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night. We wanted as many people to be able to be at this as possible. So for this final presentation, it's Thursday night at 5:15 p.m. for this first batch. The second batch is this Friday at 1 p.m. Now, the reason that's convenient is because Friday is not a class day. Actually, if a teacher is trying to make you come to class on this Friday, they're not supposed to. Like, it's considered dead day or whatever, study day, right? So you're not supposed to have classes this Friday. That's supposed to be the day you're studying for your finals. Like, you can get all of that done in one day, right? So check with the teachers if that is the case and you have any of that. But that is sort of a university break day, right? And so we're using that day as sort of time where you can come see those presentations if you want to. I can tell you some of the names, like some of these people I've only watched I didn't know them from their classes because they're in a different concentration. It's very visual effects heavy this semester. The only animation students we really have are Brant Glass. Robert Law is sort of a mix between visual effects and animation, and Jacob Klucher is character animation. Zane Palmore is rigging, so he's doing almost exclusively like character rigs and scripting. And Brandon Frangipani is an animation concentration, but he's focusing more in the effects animation and special effects side of that, which also kind of crosses over into visual effects. So, so if any of that stuff you want to come see, that's awesome. Come check it out. There's some really great visual effects people this semester, and I always sort of chime in about Lauren Blackard. If you saw her last time, she does like film and like her own like short films and stuff, and her work's incredible. Robert's really interesting. Robert Law's really interesting because he's doing like sort of his own thing. Like he's making just the stuff he likes to make, and it's very mimetic. Like it's very meme friendly.
Oh, see the one with the Minecraft?
Yeah, the Minecraft. Like I feel like one of these days Robert's going to be like the manager of a giant advertising firm that makes like hilarious commercials or something. So anyway, this is it's a great group. So if you didn't get to go see it, this is your chance to still get that extra credit. If you went and saw it before, I still encourage you to come see sort of how the follow-up to that is. Like you'll get to see how they grew from halfway to, how the presentations changed. Do they get better? You're only getting extra credit from one of the visits. so we go, if you didn't go, like this is your chance to get that extra credit. I encourage everybody to go. This is an extremely important part of like envisioning your future, because one way or the other, you all are probably going to be standing up there giving your own presentation in 3 to 4 years, right? So this is how you start getting prepared for that. Okay, so I mentioned that it's an extra credit opportunity. Some of you may be recognizing the fact that I'm a little behind on the grading. I feel like this is the time of year where I say that. I'm a little behind on the grading. I suck at grading. Like it's not something I'm like all eager to go do. If I had my way, I would just be like, everybody gets A's, but the university frowns on that, and so like really to me, I think the learning is the most important part. But I will be getting you those grades within this week, so you have time to be getting in additional revisions. When I get that grading done, that's also where I'll grade the revisions that already exist in there. So if you have something you've forgotten to turn in or want to turn in as a revision, plop that up there pretty soon so I can get to it on this batch. I will say, don't wait for me to get the grading of the breakfast scene done before you start your revision, because most of you probably already know where you can make it better. Some of them are very obvious. If you didn't render it, that's how you can make it better, right? So if you want to if you can get a revision in there before I even grade project 2, then that will give me the opportunity to just immediately update that grade as I'm grading it. Another couple of things that have been holding me back, I'm putting a rubric in place for the discussion. So in the past, I would just write in the comments like 3 points for your initial post, 1 point each for each reply. Instead, what I've got is just a rubric set up that I'll be attaching to it, so you can look at the rubric to see how it was graded, and it's just that way it kind of marks it a little more clearly. The university also kind of likes that a little bit better. So, okay, questions on any of that? Comments? Concerns? All right. Okay. So, how many of you got some version of a rig completed for today? So what I would say is today I'm going to start animating mine. If you think your rig is close, try to save a copy of it and try to sort of follow along. watching somebody else animate is really boring. And so I try to not make this super draggy where I'm just like doing every little tweak on the details. Mine may get a little sloppier and fast, but I'll most definitely be animating faster than you can animate, because if I animated at a pace where everybody can kind of keep up, it would be impossibly boring to watch, right? So I'll be animating a little faster than you probably are. What I would say is use this time to be testing out your rig, even if this doesn't end up being your final animation, right? If you have your rig ready, then sort of, be working with it. And this is where you'll discover things. You'll be like, oh, that toe isn't working right, or oh, the skinning on this leg isn't right. You'll always discover that once you start animating little things you didn't expect, right? And that way you can always just, trash that file and go back to the previous file and change your rig. What I would advise you not to do is be spending this class while I'm talking about the animation creating the rig, right? I know that you need a rig, but all of this stuff, like one of the biggest things that people end up getting sort of dinged on in terms of points for this project is the fact that every step of this animation, no pun intended, every portion of this explanation of how to do a walk is important to a walk feeling physically accurate. When we look at these animations in the midpoint class, and when I'm grading it with a rubric at the end of this, I'm looking to see if this feels like it really exists, like it really has weight, like it really has the right timing, and all of that stuff is tied to the poses we're going to be talking about today. I guess my warning is that some people will skip some of those poses and think it's good enough. And all of the ones that we're going to be talking about are there for a physically accurate reason. Literally, if you didn't go through all of those poses when you were walking, you would fall over. You wouldn't be able to do it. So I would say kind of keep that part in mind, that this is a process that if you just kind of trust it, it will work. And I think sometimes people get a little distracted because they're focusing on, trying to get their constraints to work. Like there's still time for that in the future. So, any questions before I jump into this? Yes.
Before you start, can you show me your rubric on this?
Try one of the other. I think it does the skeleton and then select all the model pieces that. And then it's. So now we need to shoot affect those. All right. So we're going to start this with talking about a walk cycle. So anybody, I think I list this in the syllabus. There's a couple of books that are really good resources if animation is what you're wanting to go into. One of them is a book called The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams. Richard Williams actually just died over the summer, but it's an incredible book. He was one of the animators from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a lot of different stuff. So the Animator's Survival Kit is probably the closest you'll get to an instruction book on how to animate. And this is the reference that if you just Google walk cycle, if you just Google that and then go to the image search, this is the reference that you'll see pop up everywhere. So I use it, even though there's a couple of little inconsistencies that I kind of disagree with on how I would do it, considering mainly the spine, like he draws the spine very stiff here. And I think you actually get a little bit of bobble and twist in your spine. I think some of that's just in the character design here, so I'm not, so there's a couple of little things there, but I think this is a really good way of identifying the poses that are necessary to make a character walk, right? So again, like I said, we talked about the pose-to-pose process, right? The pose-to-pose process in 2D animation was you draw pose A, like your character's arms are down, and then you draw pose B, right? The character's arms are up. And the in-betweener, or in our case Maya, would transition between those two, right? So that's what we're having here. This isn't every drawing that is required to make a character walk. These are the key poses. These are the most essential poses that are necessary to make a walk seem believable. Now, the first thing most people do when they try to start a walk cycle without using this is they just create like the two contact poses, right? And what you'll end up with, you'll see this all the time in kind of bad walk animations, is what just feels like the character's feet like skiing, right? They're just sliding back and forth. So again, as I said, all of these poses are crucial to actually physically being able to walk. They all serve physics-based reasons for existing. So I like to talk about those first, because then we kind of understand them. And creating a walk cycle and the way we're going to do it is very similar to how we would create most character animations. Is after we understand what these poses are trying to achieve, we can just go in there and start creating these poses and sort of flipping back and forth between them to see if it's transitioning the way we want it to. So our first pose is the contact pose. Why do you think it's called that?
I think the first action you do, basically.
Yeah, so it's the first pose that your foot is contacting the ground, right? Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also so like if we think of our key poses, those key poses are like you're going to choose poses that are essential to understanding the action. And so that means you usually pick a point at which a change is getting ready to happen, right? Like we would make a keyframe for the last frame that our arm is down, and a keyframe for the first frame that our arm is up, right? And then we'll just see what we get in that transition. If the transition isn't good enough, we may need some other keyframes, right? If there's a very specific pose the character hits as the arm is going up, that might be a key pose as well. And so what we're recognizing here is that the thing that is getting ready to change is in this contact and in this contact back here on the back foot, right? The front foot, this is the first pose, or this is the first instant that the front foot contacts the ground, right? It's also the last little bit of time where that back foot is still in contact with the ground, right? So something to notice on this, our characters shouldn't have arms, but if they do, and when they do, when you're animating a character later, recognize that when you walk, your arms counter each other. So the character's right foot is forward, but the right arm is back, right? And I see that, like, and just watch people walk or sort of address it in yourself. The reason that happens is actually for balance, right? If I have to put this leg forward, I kind of throw myself off balance. And the way I fix that is twisting my spine to kind of keep myself in balance, right? And so that's why you end up with this countering pose. The alternative to that is a walk that feels like this, right? And that feels really strange. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not a time when you might need that, right? Like a strut or something like that. But recognize that just sort of in this standard vanilla walk cycle, this is what we're going to get is this countering arms. So with this contact pose, recognize that the character is kind of falling forward, right? Animation, you'll hear a term that, or a phrase that a lot of people use in animation, which is a walk is just a perpetual fall forward, right? I'm throwing myself out of balance, or I wouldn't be able to move, right? If I'm in balance, I'm stationary. Like to be able to move, I have to throw myself out of balance, and then as I'm falling, I have to catch myself, right? So I'm continuously falling forward and catching myself. The down pose, the next pose, is the pose in which the character is catching themselves, right? Why do you think we call it the down pose?
Because they're going down.
Exactly, like it's the lowest point that the hips will be in this animation, right? That's the down, like the down. The other thing is that's where your foot is going to be completely down as well, completely flat, right? You notice in our contact pose, we're kind of hitting on our heel. If we were maybe tiptoeing, we'd be hitting on our toes, right? But then what's happened is our character, if this is a perpetual fall forward, this is the point where they hit their lowest point, and gravity is pulling on them this whole time, right? Gravity's pulling them downward, and that foot is what's keeping them from hitting the ground, right? That foot is what starts pushing back against the ground. So really what's happening is their weight is falling forward, and their leg is absorbing that weight and pushing back up, right? Now something you'll notice about the back foot here is it's kind of kicking back behind them, and that's because of friction. That foot is sort of pushing backwards to drive our character forward, right? This is like one last push that they get to give, that foot gets to give to push the character forward. So one of the ways you can show that is to kind of have that toe kick back just a little bit. Okay. Next pose, well, one last thing I'll mention on the down pose. Notice that the arms are still kind of spread out there. One of the ways I like to think about that is on our contact pose, the arms are kind of out, but then our character drops, right? And just like if you were to drop a parachute or like a small parachute, as it drops, it spreads out a little bit, right? So it's almost like it's dropping because the character's torso is dropping, and we're getting this overlapping action. So that's why the arms go a little wider there. That's sort of a nitpicky detail. It's not always there like that, but if the arms are kind of loose, they are. So our next pose is the passing pose. Why do you think it's called the passing pose?
The leg is switching.
Yeah, so I'm not just asking this like to keep you all awake, but really this is a good way to remember what these poses are for, right? This is the point where your back leg is passing forward to go to the front of the pose, right? Because if this is you can think of it as a perpetual fall forward, but this passing pose, I like to think of this as kind of like like your character is pole vaulting over their leg, right? So if you have your contact pose here, your character is going to push off with his back leg and sort of launch themselves over the supporting leg, right? And so that means they have to get this front leg or this back leg back out in front sooner, so they can start to catch themselves. It's also where you're going to be switching in your arms. So your arms are also sort of passing by their sides as well. Now, height-wise, it's usually somewhere around the same as the contact pose in terms of where this little ball that you're drawing for the hips. You'll see that it sort of stays about that height. Okay, the up pose. Why do you think that's the up pose? He goes above, yeah, because he's up there, right? This is the highest pose. This is the highest point your character will be in this walk cycle. Now that's interesting. Actually, let's step back just for a second to the passing pose. Okay, and we'll come back to the up pose here in a second. So when I talked about that being a pole vault, this is the part where I get to wake you all up a little bit. When I talk about that being a pole vault, that means our character is on one leg, right? This passing pose, the character has sort of pushed themselves, and they're launching over, and that one leg is the only leg that is supporting them, right? So, I know not everybody wants to volunteer for stuff, but could I have a few people volunteer to stand up and try something out for me? Okay. Like you all can if you want to. So yeah, you can stand up where you're at. So. Anybody else want to? It's going to be fun. You ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready for some fun.
It really does make more sense if you can feel it, right? Okay, so stand like I'm standing right now. Your feet are kind of, sort of spread apart a little bit, right? And your weight is evenly distributed between your 2 feet. Okay? So, now what I want you to do is without changing your hips at all, without shifting your weight at all, I want you to try to lift one of your feet. Cheating over there.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work, right? You can never lift a foot, and so like it's impossible to do without falling over. If you pick that foot up, you're going to tip, right? And the reason for that is because I'm changing what is supporting my weight from 2 feet supporting my weight to 1, and that 1 foot is not underneath me; it's over to the side, right? Y'all can sit down now. So, sort of a rule that I use is your character can never pick one of its feet off the ground until it shifts its weight over the new base of support, right? I mean, unless you want the character to fall. This is such a simple concept, but it's the one that will trip you up a lot because it means that your hips do like all of these little micro shifts all the time. Like your hips are constantly redistributing your weight over your legs, right? So that passing pose means that our character's weight, if we saw this from the front, our character has shifted over that foot in order to raise the other leg up off the ground, right? So that means the walk will have this sort of side-to-side motion, right? That weight shift. So we'll look at that as we're creating the character. So back to the up pose. This is the highest point that our character is going to be, and they're still on that one leg, right? But why is the passing pose not the highest point? That's the one where you're standing on that one leg, right?
Well, because you're not pushing anything up.
Right.
Going down again. I don't know.
So something else to think about is the character is starting to fall forward, right? And so this illustration has him rolling up on his toe, I think, as an example. You do that a little bit, but probably not as much as he shows in this example. And the reason for that is because in this pose here, the foot isn't out in front yet. It's not ready to catch them, right? And so we kind of roll up on our toe to give ourselves just a little bit more time for our foot to flip out in front of us and catch us, right? And so you see this foot here is really in the process of like flipping out there, right? That's why we kind of get this drag on the tip of the toes because you're trying to get it out there in front of yourself pretty quickly. And then we're back to the contact pose, okay? Now we call a walk animation a walk cycle. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we start animating, but using the word cycle usually implies that once I get to the end of this animation, I'm back where I started, right? And I started in my contact pose, and there I am. I'm back at my contact pose. But is this a full cycle?
No.
Only half of it, right? This is only one step. So if I start my contact pose with, or our character is the right foot forward, right? After I've gone through all 4 of these poses, I'm back at my contact pose, but I'm at the contact pose where my left foot is forward. So if I just started the animation over again, my legs would pop, and I'll be back at this pose here. So a full walk cycle is actually 2 of those, right? Contact, down, passing up, contact, down, passing up, and then here, we're back at that first contact again. Okay? Is that making sense? Okay, so we use the word cycle because it goes through that whole cycle, but there is a difference in me taking those 2 steps, right? I'm starting in my contact pose, take that step, I'm back at that contact pose again, but there's something very significant that is different, right? Which is I'm 2 steps further forward. So that pose isn't exactly the same. it's the version of the pose I have here slid forward, right? Now, if we think about that, there's two different ways of thinking of this walk animation. How many of you play video games? Okay. How many of you are currently playing video games? Right. So if you do that animation, right, and you need in some parts of the animation, you need the character to run into the temple, and then in other parts they need to run into the cave, and then in other parts they need to, walk to the village or whatever, right? Well, for a game animation, you don't just animate each of those possible places they can go, and try to solve every possible location they can be. How an animation works in games is a character is walking or running in place, and then the game slides that running animation around, right? Think of it as like your character's on like a little treadmill running in place, but then that treadmill is on the back of a truck that's just being driven around everywhere, right? That's really what's happening. And if you don't see the truck or the treadmill, it just looks like your character is running along the ground, right? And wherever you point the character, it looks like the character runs in that direction. Now it can get a little more complicated than that. There are additional animations for turns and stuff like that. But that's what we traditionally refer to as a walk cycle. It's that you only have to do those poses, and you do those poses in place because eventually you're planning on sliding that character around. Right? Now the problem with that is, if you have played video games, is feet sliding, right? Where it feels like your feet are not actually touching the ground. Like they hit the ground and they just feel like they kind of swim around everywhere, right? We don't want that. Now there's ways you can make that, you can reduce that in games. Some of them are by like programmatically having the foot stick to the ground.
IK system.
Yeah, IK systems built into the engine. The others are just simply tracking the run speed and scaling that. So if your character is moving forward like 10 units in a second, that means your character's foot has to be moving backwards exactly at the same rate, right? And so it sort of lines up then. So you can get it closer than it was like back in the early 2000s when feet sliding was everywhere and nobody cared. But there is still an issue with that. Now we could do it that way in Maya too. We could animate our character walking in place, and then we could just group that entire character and slide that group forward, but we're going to have that same feet sliding problem. And that's not how you do a walk animation for film, right? For film, if you're Monsters Inc. or Monsters University or whatever, if Sully is going to walk across the scene, they just create these poses and move him across the scene as he's going. So one of the reasons for that, and I'll kind of show you inside of Maya, is this. If I grab my character's sort of center of gravity, its root control, and I move it forward and backward, right, the feet stay planted to the ground. You see that? That's the part where feet sliding, that's how we sort of combat that, right? Is I want those feet to stay firmly planted on the ground. Versus if these were both moving together, that foot feels like it's kind of sliding around, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate a walk cycle. I'm going to walk you through creating these poses in sort of the order and method that I use. Again, I'll acknowledge that, and I'll probably just pull this over here off to the side so I can reference it and bring it back when I use it. Again, it's worth mentioning that everybody's robot or everybody's character is probably different. Anybody have a character that doesn't have a foot? It's like maybe more like a spider leg or something like that, right? Yeah. Right. So some of the contact poses and stuff like that aren't going to have that same rolling up on the toe or hitting on the heel because your character doesn't have a heel, right? Recognize that the physics is still the same, though, right? Your character still has to push off with that leg, still has to catch themselves with that leg. Some of you may have a character that has like the backwards bending knee. It's all still kind of the same, right? So we're going to go ahead and start making this animation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the keyframes of the character being in a stopped position, and then I'm going to transition into that first contact pose, right? So you do snipping tool. Actually, no, let's do it on this one. So if we use this as an example, right? This is the animation I'm going to do, but I am going to also create a idle pose or a neutral pose right here. It's going to be very poorly drawn of the character just standing there, right? And that way they can go into that first contact pose, right? And then I'm going to do all of these poses that I need, right? But again, that's just 2 steps. Our animation needs to be 6 steps. So what I'll do then is I'm going to duplicate all of those steps 2 times. I'm going to copy those and paste those 2 times. And then after I've copied and pasted them 2 times, I'll create an ending pose down here again, right? Where he kind of comes to a stop. Now, I just like doing it this way, so you have that ease in and ease out at the beginning. If yours isn't making these start and stop poses, that's okay. I sort of talk about this right now to point out that the cycling part of the animation, the part that we're going to duplicate, does not include this first pose or that last pose, right? That's one of the biggest issues people have when they copy and paste those keyframes, is they're copying this keyframe too. So we're only going to be copying and pasting the contact to the contact. And I'll kind of keep this up so we can refer to that later, and so you can admire my incredible art. There we go. Okay. So my first pose is here. I want to show you. This is a really nice tool, or a really nice tool you can create. Right. So again, we have all of everything we need to animate on these 3 controls. Right. So something that I have done is I've hidden everything else in this rigging do not touch layer so I don't accidentally select it. Right. I've put my model of my environment on a layer, and then I've locked that so I can't accidentally select that. I've put my model of my character on a layer and locked that so I don't accidentally select the layer. And then I put all my controls on a layer, mainly just so I can turn those on and off, but also like just so I can sort of isolate those if I need to, right? My reference, I don't even know what that is. So since everything is locked except for my controls, that means the only thing I can possibly select in this scene are my controls, right? Everything else is locked. Now this is really, I know this sounds like not that big of a deal, but this is really handy because now to select all of my controls, all I got to do is drag select it, and I don't have to worry like, did I select that joint and accidentally mess up my character, right? So if I have that hidden, I have everything else locked, that's all I need to be able to select. Now, I know we've talked about this before, but the way the pose-to-pose process works is for me to think of each of my poses as a drawing, right? I am trying to get a finished drawing of that character. And the way I lock that drawing down is that I set a keyframe on every control that I used to animate that. Every control, every channel, right? That way I know that no matter what happens in some other part of the animation, if I come back to frame 10, that pose is still going to look like it did the last time I saw it, right? And that means that whenever I'm going to set a keyframe, I have to select all 3 of these controls and hit S, right? Now that's not that much work because our character right now only has 3 controls. Eventually, your character may have 500 controls. Literally, that is not an exaggeration. If you want to check it out, there's a free rig of a dragon online that you can download, and it's hundreds and hundreds of controls. And I know that sounds crazy, but I want to be able to nail all of those down on my pose so I can be in complete control of this. So there's a really nice thing that you can do to make this easier on yourself. So this is where we dip just briefly into the concept of scripting. Now I may have shown you some of this before. If so, this is sort of reiterating it. In our shelf up here, I'm going to go to custom. And currently custom is empty. Right, this is where I can make my own buttons, right? If I needed to make a button for something I do a lot that's not on my shelf, I can sort of pull a button out and put it on here. So this is also where I can create buttons of my own scripts. So I'm not going to teach you how to script today. That's not what this is about. But if I go down here to the bottom corner, right here, right below my play button and all of that, you'll see this little it's like a little box with a parentheses and a colon in it, right in the bottom corner. And I open that up. It's going to give me my script editor. I think another way you can find that is Windows, and I think it's General Editors, maybe, yeah, Script Editor, right there. So your script editor is really neat. There's a couple of things that I guess we kind of talked about before, which is there are two different languages in Maya that you can use to write scripts. Anybody ever done any programming using Python?
I tried.
If you can program in Python or you know anything about the Python language, Python is one of the languages that exists in Maya. And so you can use that to write your own little scripts and execute them, right? So that's really handy for stuff that's like tedious, repetitive tasks, like selecting 500 controls, right? But you don't have to know how to program in Python to be able to do some of this, right? So right now I'm in Mel. Like you get these two tabs, Mel and Python. Make sure you're in the Mel tab, not the Python tab. And watch what happens up here. This is sort of the listener. This is going to watch things that I do in my scene and execute those commands. And you see we have stuff up here, like select -R and then all these words, right? So watch what happens when I deselect everything. If I just click out here in the space, this select -CL, right? That is the Mel script for clearing your selection, right? And to show you that, if I were to highlight that, Control C, paste that down here. If I have all my controls selected, right, and I type in this select.cl or -CL semicolon and hit enter, it'll clear my selection, right? So basically that little piece of script right there executes the task inside of Maya of clearing all of the things you have currently selected. Right? Alternately, if I click and select something, if I select my my root control, you'll see I get this select-R root control semicolon. Right? So that means as I do things in here, I can start seeing the Mel script for how to execute that, right? So here's what I like to do. I like to go edit, clear all. That way everything is clear. Right? I like to click out here. So now it's select clear and drag select all of the controls I need. So that means that basically this little piece of code right here is all I need in order to clear whatever I previously had selected and select my entire character, right? So here's where it gets cool. I don't have to type that in every time. I can now middle mouse drag that up to my custom shelf and release it. It's going to ask me what type of script this is. It's a Mel script. And so now I have a little button up there. And every time I hit that button, it's going to select my entire character. Right? So basically, whenever I click that button, it's going to run that script that I have in there. Does that make sense? So this is really nice. Like maybe I need a button. Let's say I have a character that has a face rig and a body rig, and I need one button for the body and one button for the face. Right? I can just choose all the face attributes, drag those up to the shelf, call that one face. Drag one up for the body, call that one body. Sometimes it'll get a little confusing what these are named, so I'll show you kind of quickly. If you right-click on this and say Edit, you can change elements of this, including the script that is ran or the command that is ran. You can also go over here to Shelves, and you can change the icon label. So I'm just going to write All. So now you'll see I have the word All up there on my button. And so now I know that that'll just select my entire character whenever I need it. So this is really nice because that saved me like 4 clicks as I'm animating, right? And really that's where we start to save the most amount of our time. The last thing I want to, I should mention this. These shelf buttons, once you close down Maya, that is saved in your preferences of your profile, right? So if you create a shelf, or if you create a button on one computer in here, and you go to another computer in here, that button should stay. If you create that shelf though and take it home to work on it, your documents profile is different at your home computer, so you won't have that button, right? So you'll need to make buttons on completely new computers, but since your profile follows you here, you should be able to keep those buttons no matter which computer you're setting at. Okay. So again, the last thing I'm going to do before I really start animating this though, is I'm going to turn on auto key. Now that's just a Greg preference because I animate kind of fast and then I scrub the timeline to see how it looks. And if I don't remember to hit the S key, I'll lose a pose. And that can be a little frustrating if it was something like the bouncing ball where all you were doing was squashing and stretching it. You're like, oops, I lost it, I'll recreate it. This, you may work for a long time just to get the perfect pose, and if you forget to set that key, sometimes that can be very frustrating. So auto key again, right underneath my play button, right here, turning it on. So select everything, I'm going to hit S to make sure there's a keyframe on everything, and then I'm going to take just a little bit of time and mess up my pose a little bit. So, when I rigged this character, I rigged it as symmetrically perfect as I can, right? But I rarely stand symmetrically perfect, right? Everybody kind of has a little bit of like a lean, or maybe they like twist one leg, or one leg is further in front. So just to give this a little bit more realism, I usually, my first pose on pose 1, I go in here, squat them a little bit. I maybe will shift my weight just a little bit in one direction, get some angle on it, turn this foot back. So it's really subtle stuff just to get my character feeling a little more casual, right? So let's start it maybe like that. Okay, again, select all, just to make sure, S, that's to nail everything down. So no matter what I do anywhere else on my timeline now, when I come back to frame 1, I should always get that pose. Right? So first pose I'm going to go into from here is my contact pose. So just as a reminder, the contact pose is this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get my contact pose. I'll go forward maybe to frames, let's go to 10. Give me a little bit of room there. 10 is probably going to be a little too fast. Let's get a 6. And I'm going to go ahead and start getting my contact pose for this. So hit S on everything just to nail it down. I'll go ahead and take my rotate out of that and my knee out of that by putting that back to 0. This is one of the reasons it's really important to freeze your transformations. Right? And then I'm going to go forward my foot. And so the first thing you'll notice is that once I get to the extent of my leg's length, my control keeps going, but my foot doesn't, right? So this is where you kind of have to start working with this as a puppet. Now, there are ways you can add more complex rigging to make that leg stretch, but mine doesn't have that rigging, so I need to get my character forward to where, I usually like to get it to where I'm not seeing any of that, like, where I've stretched past the extent of the leg. So the reason for that is when you get a when your character reaches past that point, the leg snaps straight, and if that happens during your animation, you'll notice it. And so there's a term for it. It's called IK pop, It looks like you'll notice this like snap of the IK going perfectly straight and rigid, right? And so usually I try to get my leg relatively straight with just a little bit of really subtle bend to it.
So if I have any of these posters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, my contact pose. So, small pet peeves of mine. I very rarely stand with my toes pointed perfectly forward either, but I rigged my character that way. Like usually my toes are sort of angled out a little bit. Yours probably do too. And when you're doing a step like that, you'll notice your toe doesn't point straight forward, kind of angles and just a touch, right? So I'm going to give just a little bit of an angle to that foot.
Unless you're pigeon-toed like me.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite.
So you get something like this, right? And the other thing is like, sometimes people will be like, well, I want the step to be this long, but my character can't reach, right? Recognize there's a lot of different ways you can make that reach happen, right? One of them is if I rotate my character's hips like this, the distance from the hip to the ankle gets a little shorter, right? And so now my stride can be just a little bit longer. Right? I can move both of these forward. Now I'm going to get to about the extent of that back leg too. About there. And then I'm going to roll up onto my toe. So if you'll remember how I did that in this rig is I have the ball control and I have the toe control. But if I rotate them together, I get this. Right? So you'll actually be able to get further forward on that step than you might expect. So I go something like that. I'm also going to push my character up just a touch. I feel like I've maybe extended him a little too far forward. So maybe something like that. That's not bad. And just sort of to fix that last little bit, I'll rotate this a little bit like that to lean out. How am I feeling about that? There we go. Okay, so you saw how long that took me to set that pose. That's why I like auto key, is because every time I turned it or moved it, it set a keyframe on that channel that I changed. But if I didn't remember to set a keyframe on it, it still will be unkeyed. So I just sort of a safety precaution, I always choose everything and hit S just to make sure that every channel has a keyframe on it. Now, the temptation is great to start scrubbing my timeline and see my progress, right? And that's fine. You can do that. Recognize it's not going to look right yet. Like this is just this step, and I'm like, wait, that doesn't quite look right. Like you're just kind of sliding forward, right? That's okay. I'm just doing my key poses right now, right? And again, if you think about this as a drawing, you don't get to flip through those drawings yet, right? You just get to see your key poses. So that's why I use the greater than, less than key, or period and comma, to step back and forth between my two existing poses. And you can judge this. You can say, does this feel like a correct step forward? And actually, I think it kind of does, right? You can see that my back leg is kind of staying for the most part. The toe is staying in the right spot, kind of rotates just a little bit. My character is sort of going forward at a stride that is that's pretty good. I probably would maybe consider pushing my leg inward, my weight inward. So this is just sort of a personal preference. And we'll talk about this a lot more in character animation a few years from now. When a person walks, the width that they have their feet apart will sort of make the walk seem more sort of stereotypically masculine or feminine, right? And sort of the extremes of that a runway model, like when she's walking, like kind of looks like she's walking a tightrope, like puts the feet very close to the center, like they're walking a straight line, versus like a cowboy like does this like wide, like, strut, right? Like, and I know those are very, again, stereotypical. So I like to find somewhere in the middle, unless I'm going for a specific gender that I'm trying to show this character as, right? And in this case, like, I mean, most people don't walk around campus at either of those extremes. Most people kind of just walk with their feet kind of a little closer to center. The faster you walk, the more sort of in the sort of center range your feet will get, because then you will have less weight shifting, right? So again, that's the other thing. If our stride is really wide, our character has to shift their weight a lot from side to side. So I just got to push mine a little bit more toward the center, right? And we're just going to go ahead and call that my contact pose. Okay. This is where we kind of talk about process a little bit. Now, this is not really a standardized technique that everybody uses. This is more a technique that I show you all, that I'm getting ready to do, that I show you all to make it easier for you, because getting your walk to end on this contact pose as well is really difficult to space out, right? Really, to do that, you need to know how big of a stride is this, and I mean, really, to get our end pose, which is going to be down here somewhere where it loops, right? We need this exact same pose. We just need it to be somewhere down here, right? And what most people do is trial and error. Like, they just try it, they set some key poses, they're like, oh, that's wrong, and then they shift it and adjust it. You already have plenty to worry about. So I want to come up with a method to show you this that doesn't require you just to fight with it, right? After you get more comfortable with this, you probably will just end up fighting with it, and just that's how you work. But what I usually do is I give myself some reference points, right? So I'm just going to create this box. I'm going to move it up here. And just to make this easier on myself, I'm going to hit D to change my pivot point, and hold down V and snap that to this back corner, right? So now I can go back to move. And so now my pivot point is there. Now the reason I do that is so I can go to my, say, my left view here, right? And I can line up this pivot point about where the back of my foot is, right? The back of my heel, right? We don't have to do this with the back of the foot. You could do it with the toe, but to me, the back of the foot feels pretty good. And now that my pivot point is there, that means I can scale that in this direction to figure out the length of my stride, right? So if I go back to my left view, I can scale this until I get to my other foot's back corner, right? I want to hit plus a few times to make my scale tool bigger so I can be a little bit more precise with that. Yeah, right about there. And I have to go minus to get it back down. So this is about the length of my stride. Right? And just so I can see it a little bit better, assign a new material. I'll make it red. Right. So that's the stride length for the first step, right? So where the character is going to end up at the end of the contact down, passing, and up is one length away from this. So if I hit Control D and then move it, I can move it out here to the end of this, and that's going to be about the end of the first step. So after he goes through all of those poses and is back at his next contact, he'll be at the end of this box. Now, if you want to be really precise about it, you can hold down V and snap it to that box, because it'll snap it to the vertex of this. And then I'll do that one more time, because this has to be two steps, right? Control D, move that forward, V, snap it. So that means at the end of my next step, the second step, it will be that range, right? So now that I'm out here on frame 30, I'll select all of this. I'll go to my left view, and then I will slide this forward until that heel lines up with it right about there. So now you'll see that that's about right on it, right? Now I'm still eyeballing it. It's not mathematically perfect, but it's close enough, right? So I can then go back to custom, select everything, and hit S. And then I'll keep these. I'll just add these to a layer and hide them, so I can bring them back up if I need them. So that means what we get now is steps into that first pose at frame 6, and then he slides into where he needs to end. I have that on about frame 30, right? Now, again, this is really the most important part about when we start copying and pasting these. This pose has to be the exact same pose as this pose, except for the fact that it is slid forward 2 steps, right? We'll talk about why that is here in a bit. But if I do it this way, I can kind of assure that that will happen. Now, something you may want to remember is that you have different modes that you can move things in. So if you hold down W and click here, if you're in object mode, when you move this forward, it's going to do this, right? The way we move it all together is go to world mode, and that's how I was able to slide it all forward in the same pose. Any questions? Am I going kind of quick? Again, kind of take it bite-sized chunks. I am recording, aren't I?
We'll find out.
That'd be awfully nice. I am! Yay!
Say hello to the camera.
So the other thing I'll say is I go through this process a little less in detail, but a little more in practice on the videos that are on the web, or on the D2L page. So you can probably watch through those and see a lot more of I sort of follow that a little bit more step by step. Right now I'm trying to make sure that the concepts are syncing in good. Okay. So in this giant picture thing that I made here, what I have now, my idle pose, or my neutral pose, right? And I have my contact pose and my other contact pose, right? Remember, I need this whole range of contact to contact to repeat 2 more times after this, but I'm just going to work on this range, and then once that's looking good, I'll copy paste all of those at the end. So from this range, contact down, passing up, contact down, passing up, contact, I got the first and last contact. What should I do next? A lot of poses I could choose from. Which one would be the next one you would go to?
After contact,
Yeah.
down, right?
Down? So that's our next one. Anybody think they'd choose a different one?
You have to it has to pass again, isn't it?
Well, it has to contact again too. Don't recognize the only one I have is this one and this.
Yeah, it has to go down because it already passed, right?
So yeah, down is the next pose that happens linearly, but when I'm creating it, is that the one I want to make?
I mean, I feel like if you already have your character in the contact pose, you might as well just make that middle contact pose.
Okay. So, I mean, I think there's not a right or wrong way of doing it. My 2 cents, though, is this other contact pose makes all of these poses easier, right? So if I figure out that second contact pose, my passing pose is almost going to create itself, right? So that's one of the reasons, like, I kind of think ahead. The other thing is, what if I made the down, the passing, the up, and then my character is not in the right place for the contact, right? When I make the contact to get them there, there may be like this weird lunge to get to that contact pose. right? So it kind of is letting me subdivide it to figure out what these poses should look like. Now again, there's not a right or wrong way of doing this, but I usually take sections of my animation and sort of subdivide them that way. That way, Maya can do some of the heavy lifting for me, right? It's not going to get it right by any means, but it'll at least help me get started. You are completely right. The down pose is the next pose that happens in terms of the action. But the way you work can kind of change. And so I think this is a good time to just think about that. What are you going to be, how, like, it's kind of like laying out your battle plan, right? Like you're going to go Christmas shopping. You're like, okay, first we hit Belk's, and then since we're at Belk's already, we can run across to Dick's and then swing by GameStop for something for ourselves, right? Like you lay out the battle plan, and then you're like, wait, we're really going to hit the food court right at 6 o'clock? No, we should like try to get there earlier, right? So there's not a line at the pretzel place.
Is that a very specific?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, y'all. Like the pretzel is the most important part. So, 'tis the season. So I'm going to go about halfway here. I think 18. I'm on it. And you're going to see that at 18, I have I don't have the right pose, right? Like 18, like there's some stuff messing up on it. That does not look like the right way our contact pose should look. But I can fix that, right? One of the things that may be happening is this foot is easing out of here back into there. Like the ease in and out isn't the same on all of these. And so I want to try to line that up with the control here, right? Just so I can kind of see it. So you can see that for some reason it's actually going a little too fast. It's probably because there's not a pose. Yes?
When you keyframing, because I was keyframing the roots, and it's not working. It's like making like a jumble mess.
So I'm actually keyframing the root, the foot, and the other foot.
Like the joints for the feet, or the actual feet?
No, the controllers that I made for them. Like the these little rings. Hey, I just hid the joints. So. Okay. So one of the things I could do a couple of different things. One is I could just go ahead and set this keyframe here and try to adapt it, because some of the things that are really kind of messing up is really just this. If I pull this one up just a little bit so I can see where it's at. If I slide these two back, is that closer to correct? So if I go look at my left view, that's actually way closer. This one is a little bit more like there. So I'm kind of eyeballing this a little bit. This one maybe a little bit more like that. So, however, like once I get this all in here, the thing to recognize is that I'm still in the wrong contact pose, right? I'm still with the one where my character's right foot is forward. So what I really need is the mirror of this pose, right? Now, there's a couple of tricks on how you can get that. There's some scripts that will allow you to just mirror this whole pose. But no, honestly, by the time you're done fighting with that script, you'll probably have, you could have just remade the pose. Well, what you can do is you can think sort of strategically about the things that you change in here. So a good example of this is 24.6 is the amount of roll I have on this foot, right? And the knee is set to 0, or set to -9. So if I want something similar, I can possibly just use some of those keys back here, right? So for example, the translate Z on this is 10.084. I can hit Control C on that value, go over here, and paste that in, 0, oh, I'm sorry, V, enter. And then of course I want my X to be zeroed. Do I? Maybe I do not. I want my rotates, everything except for rotate Y maybe to be zeroed out. So I do something like that, and that. And then, what is going on with my knee here? Why is it doing that? Oh, I know what's going on. So something else is like, the only thing that's really changed in here is I got this rotate 12 on this, right? I can always shift that to negative 12 to get the inverse of that rotation. And then my X was at negative 0.8, or at 0.8, I can put a negative on that to shift it over. And so now we're starting to get something that is a little closer. Actually, that negative 0.8 probably isn't going to work because it's not centered. So I can start eyeballing parts of this and start getting things that are working. Ball and toe, hold that up there. All right. Now for this one, I want to do sort of the opposite. I want to scoot it forward. I'll take out all of that. And I want to rotate this up where the heel is hitting. Probably right about there, right? And so my knee is pointing out maybe a little too much on this one, so I can pull that back in a little bit. My knee is not pointing out enough on this one. And so again, I have all of that. I can hit S. And what I can do now is sort of step through these to see if this feels right. So neutral, contact, contact, contact. So if I hide these, bless you. Okay, now one of the reasons I use this stepping method is because I can see this transition and look at one thing. Like, is that foot seeming like it's staying on the ground during that step, right? If I drag my timeline, though, it's going to look bad. Right? This is what my walk looks like so far. Oh, too fast. Right click, playback speed, real time. So that's not very good, right? But what it does is it gets us closer to those other poses, right? So now my passing pose, which is halfway between my contact and my contact, my passing pose is, let me find this here, is going to be right about here, right? And if you look at that, it's not the passing pose, but it's not that far off, right? It's not as far off as it could be. So this will make, because I've got these two contact poses, this will maybe make my life a little easier in creating some of these poses in between. So let's go ahead and do my contact pose next. So that's kind of how I like to do it, is since I got contact and contact, I can sort of subdivide that now and go to my passing pose, right? So if I create my passing pose here, one of the things that's important is that it's on the ground. So that seems to be, oh, yeah, that's 0. So one of the reasons this isn't on the ground right now is because of all of these values, really my ball and toe more than anything. And then some of these rotates. There we go. And so I'm just going to keyframe everything. So you'll see they go contact, passing, contact. Right. So my contact here, we can kind of look at, again, the drawing here and here. My contact pose, again, this foot is on the ground. It's staying on the ground as it slides back, right? This other foot is up in the air, and of course we talked about our weight shift. Our weight is going to be shifting over the leg of support, right? So if we look at our character, currently our weight is sort of right in the middle. If I look at this in the front view. His foot is coming off the ground. If I raise it up more, you can kind of tell, right? That looks like he would just sort of tip over, right? Now, the reason for that, again, is because we got this base of support here. Right? And everything above it, like if we were to draw a line straight up through it, I don't know why it's just drawing on the character. You would see that that's not really centered, right? I would need to sort of move my character over this way to center it over that way. So that's what I'm going to do in my perspective view. I'll go ahead and push the character up a little bit, push it over this leg. I usually like to add just a little bit of rotates in there too. Maybe I'll lean it that way. That allows me to push him up a little bit more. Fix that knee. Now from the side angle, I'm going to go ahead and take the ball and toe stuff out of there. And from the side angle, one of the differences I have an opinion on this is how high that toe comes up. So we're actually pretty lazy animals. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's because that allows us to conserve energy. So you can, our brains eat a lot of calories, right? So if you are not taking these giant steps everywhere you go, you're conserving more calories, right? So in a step, usually our foot just barely clears the ground. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you hear this little like scuffs as people are walking, right? So I'm going to go ahead and bring my foot up enough to clear the ground and maybe a little bit more than that. But I'm not going to go crazy high, right? Because then it's going to feel like they're trying to step over something. So my character has big feet. This is a character design issue, but not a bad one necessarily. And then something I like to do is I kind of add a little toe drag behind that. So it's hitting the ground now. I'll maybe bring it up a little bit more. Go back just a touch, right? Something like this. So now if I step through this, sort of step over to the side so you can see it. So I have my contact, passing, contact, and then my contact, right? So I can get my other passing pretty quickly now. Since I've gone through all that, I just need to do one for the other side. So I'll go through this a little faster instead of describing everything so much in detail. Oh, that's not right. S. And so now I get contact, passing, contact, passing, contact. So let's look at this and see how that looks now. So it's starting to look more like a walk. Shorten my timeline so we can see this a little better. Okay. Here's the temptation, right? Starting to look like a walk. Maybe Marlo won't notice I didn't do those other 4 poses. The thing about this is it's looking more like a walk, but it also is missing a lot of crucial details, like weight, right? Gravity exists in that world, right? Or it should look like it does at least. And right now it doesn't really feel like he's pushing against the ground or absorbing that weight from the impact. And technically this isn't a possible walk, right? You couldn't do this walk. It's defying gravity in a lot of different ways. So, so this is the hard part about it, is I know you're on a timeline, I know you have deadlines and everything, but trust the process. Those other poses are important. And they're going to make it a lot better too. But before it makes it better, it's going to make it look like it's getting worse. Okay, so that's why I'm like, trust the process. What a lot of people will do is they'll start to do their down pose. They won't be happy with the down pose, and they'll be like, never mind, I'm messing it up. I'm just going to leave that one out. It's because the down pose doesn't look right without the up pose. So our down pose, again, I can sort of pull this up real quick. The down pose, the foot goes flat, the weight goes down, the back foot is kicking off, right? And so again, I can just go halfway between frames 6 and 12, my contact and passing, and I'll go ahead and set it right about there. So my down pose, my foot is going to go flat, and it's going to be in the same locked location as it is in my my contact or my passing pose here, right? So I can kind of steal part of that pose like that. I could go here to frame 12, right click, and say copy, go to frame 9, right click, paste, paste. Right. And so now all of those values kind of go flat. Now I'm getting a little bit of sliding there. And so I'm going to have to maybe work with that just a little bit on that pose and that pose. So this is probably a good time to go ahead and do that, because then I can copy and paste it out here to frame 12 too. So if it slides back just a little bit, and the way you can see that greater than, less than, if I look at the heel, it sort of slides back a little bit, right? So really that means I need this foot to land more like that. So that feels a little bit more like it goes flat. Then I get it sliding back again because I messed up that duplicate pose. So I can say copy, paste, paste. And so now it feels like it goes flat and sort of stays there. Now I get a little bit of a jiggle on it. I have a feeling that's in the graph editor. So we'll look at that here in a minute. Okay, so that's part of the down pose. The other part of the down pose is that our characters, let me move that knee in just a little bit. Our character is sort of pushing off with this back foot, right? So again, if we look at it, you'll see it's like this back foot is sort of pushing them forward. So I'll probably push my character's hips forward maybe just a touch too, to give that pushing forward look. Not a lot, because remember, it's the character's kind of progressing forward anyway. And then this back foot, I can kind of push it back. I'm going to zero out the ball and toe stuff just to kind of get us something neutral. And then I can pull up here, sort of have my character sort of kick back like this, and have that toe even go a little bit more like that, right? So let's see what that looks like if I set a keyframe on everything. So maybe this is a little too much. Let me pull it back down like this a little bit more. Now, something else you can consider is rotation on the main base. Like this is the down pose, so I could have it sort of dip down, and then it's going to feel like it kind of rotates forward there on that. Or I could do the opposite. I could make it feel like the back of the body is kind of dragging, or the top of the head is sort of dragging a little bit on that down pose. The other thing to notice is my character is not actually dipping down very much in comparison to the contact pose, right? They don't go down, they actually are going up. That means I need to push them down into that a little bit more to get that feeling of weight. And it doesn't have to be huge, but it does need to be a little bit down. Right? Again, select everything, yes. So then I'll go over here, I'll create my other down pose. Again, sort of the same way with this control. I'll copy it, Go to here, paste, paste. So now that's right. And let's see how that transition happens. Not very good. So if I'm stepping back, well, it's not too far off. It just needs to be a touch further forward. There we go. Feels a little bit better. And then again, I can copy that one. Paste that one. There we go. Just for clarity's sake, let's go ahead and make my down go. Oh, select everything. Yes. And make my down go down. And then I'm going to make this foot kick out backwards. So this is what I get. So that's actually not looking too terribly bad. Let me make sure I got a keyframe on everything on there. So again, people are very tempted to stop here. What you're going to feel with this, if you watch it though, is it feels like there's a pop right in the middle. Because for the most part, the hips are completely flat as they're traveling forward, except for that one little down pop, right? And so rather than make that feel like a pop right in the middle of it, if we have the countering up, where it's going up at the end of that, it's going to feel like a wave that the character is sort of going on, right? So that's where I'm going to put in my up pose. The up pose is usually the easiest one to make because we've got so much information in here already. It's almost already there. So I'll go here in between my passing, my contact. So I'm on frame 15. I'm already sort of rolling up on my toe. Yeah. I'll push the character up. Again, this is the highest point it's going to go. And then I want to make it feel like they're sort of flinging their foot forward in order to catch themselves. So maybe I'll drag that toe a little bit more. The foot does come up kind of high here to sort of flip out there and get in front of them, right? So that's all I really need for that. Let me double check from the front, and maybe a little bit of knee work. And if you really wanted to, I could probably even rotate this way a little bit more and get a little bit more height on that. Let's try that. There we go. And so we'll do it over here too, halfway in between. All this. I'll set a keyframe on everything on this one. Again, it's going to be the highest point. Right there. Rotate. Change to this one too. Maybe drag just a little bit ahead. Feels a little too far forward to me. I think it's just where it's easing in there. So I'll go something like this. Again, zero out my toe. Up higher. Make it feel like they're sort of flinging foot out to catch himself. Toe drag. Select everything. S. This feels like a good point to save. File. Save scene as. bot anim in class. Continue. So, with all of that now, I'm going to hit play, see what this looks like. So the only thing I really have an issue with right now is the fact that it transitions from here to here a little too fast for me. So again, I'll select everything. I'll take all of these keyframes and just kind of nudge them down a little bit to give me a little bit more time to transition from here to here. Okay. Questions so far? So, this is the where we're at right now. In animation terms, we call this blocking, right? These are all of our key poses, and we have those nailed down. And I could bring a stranger in here and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they'd be like, "That robot's walking," right? But there's still plenty of little things that are not right. So some of it is like the way the character transitions into that first step. But there's some other small things, right, that you may not even be noticing that we could kind of talk about. So stuff like going from our contact to our down pose there. Like I'm still getting a little bit of that sliding feeling. And it's happening a little slow, right? So it's not feeling like the character's weight is sinking into that. There's also the little matter of the graph editor, right? Although it's maybe not bad where it's at, we could use the graph editor to definitely make it better. So we could start changing things in this animation to make it stronger. That pass is called splining or refining. Some people call it refining. And then the final pass is called polish. And polish is where you're adding those really subtle details that most people are not going to notice, they're just going to feel. An example of polish is your hands opening and closing. Right? All of my fingers do not open and close at the same time. Right? My pinky starts first, my index finger closes last, my index finger opens first, my pinky closes last. Also, like not all of the joints in my fingers bend at the same time. The second two, like the end two joints, bend first, and then the one closest to my hand bends last. Right? Those little things, like if you don't make those changes, most people won't notice it, but they'll be like, it feels a little stiff. If you add that stuff, it'll start to feel much looser, right? So some of these changes are really easy to make. I can go in here with this, like the foot going flat right there. I could select that and just move that one key on the foot one frame earlier. And so now it goes flat faster. There's some other little, there's a little jiggle there, but I'm pretty sure that's in the graph editor, and we're gonna have to fix it there. Some other little things, like the way this foot comes off the ground here, from here to here. You see that toe kind of going to the ground? So I maybe would want to go through here and sort of adjust for that just a little bit and add some additional key poses so we don't have it go through the ground quite as much, right? So we can do that out here too, make this contact go flat a little faster. Let's see how my back foot is doing on this. It's going to the ground too. So we'll go here. Maybe I would rotate that forward more with the toe. So the other thing we can do is, of course, opening up the graph editor. We're going to find tons of little things in the graph editor. So I'm going to show you this as a layout, 2 panes side by side, and then under panels, I'm just going to say graph editor. So now I have my graph editor over here beside me. Keep in mind, like the range that I'm looking at is from here to here because this is still my neutral pose, right? So, so we could just, and really what we should do is go through this one channel at a time and see what we can make better, right? So let's select my root control first. So translate X. So translate X is, in this case, if we grab this and move it, it's our character's side-to-side motion, right? And so what you'll see happen is as we move forward here, our character shifts their weight over there, and then over this transition shifts it back to the other side. And there's little things we could do, like we could pull this up a little bit and this down a little bit, and that will make it feel like it sort of holds the weight on that side just a little bit longer as it pushes it over. Or maybe we want the opposite. Maybe we want it to feel like it sort of shoots over quickly. Right? So little changes we can make in the graph editor, little bits at a time. Translate Y is my character's up and down. And so you'll see that that kind of makes sense, right? This is the character's up pose. There's the down pose. And so if we want that down to hit harder, maybe we would do something like this, right? I really don't. I'm happy with that. Or if I want this up to go even higher, I can, right? So what you'll notice, though, is if we're looking at this range right here, we're going to see patterns, right? Down, up, down, right? And you can see, like, you should be able to see, oh, this is my up pose, and then these are my down poses. Right? And so if my down pose here isn't feeling low enough, or if this down pose here is feeling too low, I can make those subtle changes here in the graph editor. Right? Translate Z is my forward and back. I'm not really going to worry about that too much right now. One of the ones I would work on is maybe my rotate Z. Right? So this is the character rotating forward and back. And so you'll notice what I did on here is I have my character rotate back on the down pose and then rotate forward after that. And so what that makes it feel like is if he's rotating down on the down pose, after he hits the down pose, it feels like the character's head sort of rolls forward as a response to hitting that, right? And so I'm going to push that just a little bit more on mine. And then we got this Y. So this is our twist, like our character twisting from side to side. So that actually looks pretty good to me. And then Z is sort of this lean. So here's one of the reasons I look at this, is because that just looks wrong, right? We had this pattern happening, but then I got this one jagged curve here on my up. And I'm like, maybe I don't need it to be that high. Maybe it needs to be something more like this, right? And if I do that, it's still kind of messes it up just a little bit. Maybe this whole thing needs to be lower, like that. You'll see that it made my knee kind of go a little too straight on that. I think I get a little bit of an IK pop, right? Maybe not. And so just cleaning that up a little bit. These are really small details, right? So the reason we're worrying about them is because it's these small details that, like, it's probably 40% of the job, right? Getting that performance is important. It's all these little things that really sort of finalize it and make it feel real. Right? And the frustrating part about this, and one of the reasons I think students kind of fight this, is because it's nowhere near as gratifying as that first part where you were setting the poses. You're getting these very big changes. You're watching your character move across the screen. And this, I'm like, I want this to be 0.2 less than it was before. Ah, that's better. And you watch it, and it's like, I don't know that it made any difference, right? Like you don't always see the changes that you make. But if you're making the correct decisions, if you're thinking about why you're making these decisions, incrementally it will get better. And what happens is, if you save the animation and you play blast it out, you save that, and then you work in the graph editor for a while, you work on all these little details, and you play blast it again, and you watch those back to back, you will see a difference. You will see it getting more accurate and more tangibly real. But you're not going to see it in these big jumps forward. For a lot of people, that's not very gratifying. And like we do this because we enjoy it, right? And so like I'm not feeling that like big lunge forward, that progress forward. So I'm, you know, it can be a little discouraging at this point. I hear you. Like that is actually one of the things that a lot of people start to fight with later on in animation is that like the polishing part just doesn't seem like you're getting as much done, right? And you'll spend hours on it and you'll be like, I can't even tell if I've done anything. You have, and that is part of it is trusting that. So, so I encourage you to spend a little bit of time in the graph editor trying to get this right. It also will help you fix little things that are messing up. So we were noticing here where my foot hits the ground, right? And then there's like a little like wobble right there, right? I want to try to figure out what that wobble is. So it looks like it may be here. So I don't know what's happening here, but I got some keys in here that are not transitioning correctly. So I'm going to select those and hit auto on that. I have a feeling it's also happening on some of these others here, like this, auto. Actually, I'm just going to select everything in here and make sure that they're all set to auto. I think that'll fix most of it. There we go. I fixed it. And then the same here on this footstep. Just select everything. Choose auto. So little things that kind of still feels like it's sliding backwards right there, doesn't it? So let me look at my translate Z. That's because it is a little bit. So it's really just that transition on one frame to there. I'm going to try this and see if this fixes it. If I select both of these and set it to linear, I think I'll get a smoother transition down. There we go. And so we can always do little small like tweaks, like where my toes going through the floor there. There we go, it's feeling better. So all of those things are going to help it. On top of that, we can add details if we wanted to. So my foot goes from rolled back here to down, right? But one of the things I could do is I could go out here, like on frame 14 instead of 13, and I could set a keyframe on my toe, key that's selected, so it's at 0 there. And on 13, I could roll it back just a little bit. So now what I get is this like, it's like the toe hits a frame later. Right? And the same on this other side. So this is where I get to add those little bitty bits of interesting stuff. At least to me, it's interesting. Key selected. Here, I will roll that toe back just a little bit. And so it's all these little things that's going to start making this feel a little bit more realistic. Other things we can think about is, are there places we need to break tangents, right? If I really want that foot impact to feel hard, like if we look at our character's foot arc, like it goes up there, up higher, and then as it comes down, it kind of feels like maybe it eases into that a little bit. So I can try this to see if it works. If I select this keyframe and set that to linear instead of ease, then I may get a harder stomp on the ground, right? So it looks like the foot hits and stomps down more. We could also do that with the rotate X, because that's going to also rotate flat. And so just these little changes is going to make it look like that foot sort of slaps down a little harder, right? Again, I don't know that all of these are, I'm trying these decisions out. I may change my mind about them later. Yeah, that's good. Rotate X. I'm looking at the wrong foot on it. Nope. That's right. So I've made all these changes. I'll sort of step back here. One of the reasons to have these controls on a layer is I can hide those, and I can hit play and see if that walk is feeling a little bit better. And I think it is. Like it's not huge amounts better, but it is incrementally better. Like I feel like some subtle improvements in there. So this is where you also fix things that you messed up when you were keying. Like if you move something a little too much, like this is where we go through and polish all of that out. Okay. I'm going to save here because this next step gets a little technical. So increment and save. So, so I have 2 steps. Got 4 more to go. Goodness gracious. It's going to take me hours, right? If only there were a trick. So remember when I said like this pose at the end has to be the exact same pose as this pose at the beginning, right? Frame 11, frame 35. So not frame 1. We're just looking at the cycling part of this, the walking part of this, the contact to contact. So if you did that correctly, and those are the exact same poses, then this next part will go pretty easily. All I have to do is make sure there's a keyframe on everything on the first and last keys, right? So hit S on 35 and hit S on 11. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up the graph editor so you can see why this works, right? Now, if I highlight this entire range of keyframes here, right, and say right-click, copy, if I go out here to frame 35 where it loops, right, I can paste that entire cycle in there. Right-click, paste. Now you'll notice that there are 2 options here. There's paste, and then there's paste connect. So let's just try paste and see what happens. Now keep in mind, I'm pasting over my last frame, frame 35. So if I hit paste, you'll see I get that more animation out through here. But you'll see what happens is our character takes 2 steps and then at the very end slides back to the beginning and takes those same 2 steps again, right? And if we think about that, that makes sense. We pasted those same keys on there. And if I want to show you this curve right here, my translate Z curve. Translate Z is the root control. It's motion forward, right? And we can see what happens is it goes forward so far and then snaps back to the beginning and goes forward, right? That translate Z is one of the only things that is different about our first frame and last frame of that animation, right? First frame and yeah, last frame, right? So it continues forward. So I want to undo that paste that I just did. Right? I'll do this again, highlight, of course, select all the controls, highlight all of this, right click, copy. And again, on top of frame 35, I'm going to right click and go to paste, but this time I'm going to choose paste connect. And what this is going to do is it's going to paste those keyframes additively to the end of that curve. So instead of going back to 0 or going back to the first keyframe, it's going to paste at the end of that curve and continue it going forward, right? So paste connect is going to do this. So if it paste connect, now instead of going back to the beginning, it's just going to keep walking forward, right? In fact, if I go out here to frame 59, paste connect again, it's going to continue to walk forward. Right? I'm going to go, that's just the 6 steps we need, but we could do this like pretty much infinitely. And so now what I get with this is my character walking forward. Now, depending on what you want to do, you can continue to have it walk forward and walk out of frame after that, or you can have it come to a stop. So I'm going to have mine come to a stop. Let me uncheck my environment here, make this a little longer so we can see it. There we go. So at the end of all of this, I'm going to add one more keyframe. And I'd say from like 82 to, let's go to like 100. Give it some time to settle. Maybe not quite 100. Yeah, let's do 100. So from that, I'm going to do one more keyframe on this where I select everything, hit S, and I'm going to kind of have this character come to a stop. Now, go forward to here, slide this forward. I'll rotate that down. I'm going to move it forward just a little bit. Just like that. Yep. So really, I'm just trying to get a stocked version of this, very similar to my first frame. Get rid of all of that. So that's pretty decent there. So stop it. Let's see. Since he's taking that last step, I'll go ahead and have him go a little bit past that, sort of settle, right? Maybe a little much. So now what happens is, right? So it's a little slow on mine, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of that time to like give him some settle time so he can kind of settle into that last pose. But that means all I really have left to do is sort of fix that transition from frame 1 into the walk and fix this transition from the end into the settle. So I'll do that kind of quickly so you can see it. So like to transition in, what I would probably do is have him do a slight weight shift about halfway through this, where he's kind of taking the weight off of that first foot. And picking that foot up. Probably don't need to be rolling up on the ball and toe as much yet. Maybe just a little bit. So really now what I'm getting is sort of stepping into it, right? All this. So now we get that. Sort of the same on the ending. I'm going to have him get into this last pose relatively quickly on a lot of stuff. So really I'm just going to copy almost this entire pose. So copy. I put it there, like about there. Paste, paste. Except for this last foot is still going to be kind of catching up and coming in to stop. I'm going to have the character sort of shift their weight a little bit over this way and maybe even go a little bit past their end destination. This. And then I want that foot to be planted on the ground a little earlier. Copy, paste, paste, all of that. Maybe a little slow. Let me select everything. Make that one happen a little earlier. Okay, so there's still some polish I would do on that, but let's see how that looks. Yeah, he kind of shoots forward there a little bit too fast. So that's where I could go into the graph editor. It's on this translate Z. You can see that it kind of does that. So I do something like this. You have him overshoot just a little bit. Same with this. Sort of ease that in just a little bit more. What was that one? Rotate. Um, there we go. So let's see if that looks any better. There we go.
It's so cute.
So the last thing I'm going to do is my staging, which I mean, I wanted to have this in mind beforehand, but the character's not doing, it's a specific walk that I can kind of stage afterwards a little bit if I have to. If it's a very specific action, like if a character's like picking up an object or something like that, you want to set up your camera so you can show that action in the right way. But now that I have the action, I can kind of do that now. So I'm going to create a camera. Call this render cam. And then instead of looking at my outliner here, I'm going to go to render cam. And I'm going to stage this in a way that I can see this action. So I know we've talked about this before, but I can click this button right here, the blue dot with the box around it, and so I get my framing of this, right? And now I can just animate my camera to follow this, right? So maybe I'll start here, and I'm staging it, thinking about composition. I want to give them a little bit of room to walk into frame here. Maybe rule of thirds. Maybe I would start a little lower, something like that. So we're hitting on that thirds. Do y'all know what I'm talking about when I say rule of thirds? So if you divide this up into three sections, width and height wise, you'll see that those sections would cross right about where his head is. So we'll start here. I'll select my camera by clicking this button here and hit S on frame 1. And he's just going to completely walk out of frame. So I'm going to go to my end frame, go kind of find him again, reframe this in a way that feels pretty good. Maybe the other third. There we go. Select my camera, hit S. So what I get now is this. Now what I will see is like he almost walks out of frame right here. So maybe I would go here to the camera, pull back just a little bit. And this should be what I get now. Let's see how it looks. All right. Well, I'm almost done with my final. So I still gotta render it, right? And so I would say most of you are probably sort of playing around with lighting and rendering as you were modeling and texturing it. Remember that if you lit it with specific lights, your character is going to move around and it may walk out of those lights. So make sure you're kind of testing your render throughout. Anything more than this, though, is sort of your call. Like if you want to take the thing that you're enjoying, like some of you may be enjoying modeling, and you want to have them walking down a city street or something, right? Like go for it. If you are enjoying the lighting and rendering, and you want it to be like a disco scene where like there's like strobe lights and like interesting colors everywhere, go for it. Right? Like do what you want to do with it. If you're really enjoying the animation, like add a jump in there. Like maybe he takes 2 steps, jumps over something, and takes 4 more steps. Right? I recognize that like I'm not saying that doing more is required. If this is what you're like, nope, I do the 6 steps, simple robot, that's cool. What I would say is like, if you can use this to find out what it is that makes you happy though, right? And if there's like a stage of this that you're enjoying, like give yourself a treat and let yourself like play in that area a little longer, right? I think that this is sort of the last phase where you get to see what it is that what you're going to take away from this class in terms of knowledge, right? What is it going to tell you about what you want to do with your life? And so listen to yourself as that's happening and find out like, this is what character animation feels like. When you're doing this, when you're animating this is what character animation feels like. And if you don't like how that feels, if you're not enjoying that process, if you're like, this is miserable, I would rather be doing my taxes. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you've told all your family, I'm going to work for Disney someday. Like, don't go into something that makes you miserable, right? I came into this when I was a student saying I wanted to do lighting and rendering. And lighting and rendering made me miserable. Like, I just could not, like, I just was not enjoying it. I enjoy it a little more now. I think part of what lighting and rendering was making me miserable was computers were really slow back then. And I wanted more feedback from it. Like, it was taking too long for me to see if that thing I did was working. And so lighting and rendering works a little differently now. You don't have to wait quite as long. You get to see those changes. Also, I just didn't understand it good enough. There were better ways of doing it. All of those things are going to sort of make themselves known to you. And this is where you'll hopefully figure out if you're saying you want to be in animation, this is where you hopefully figure out if that's true or not. I'm seeing a weird knee angle now that's really driving me nuts. Because that's what it feels like to be an animator, is to see that weird knee angle and be like, I need to fix that.
Which leg? The left or the right?
The character's right leg, right there towards the end, it kind of does this wobble out.
Yeah.
See it there. That's why I didn't look at that curve. Anyway, so yeah, like, this is, I think that I see that happening a lot. Like, that's what these classes are for, is for you to discover what it is you want to pursue. So just kind of be paying attention to that. Like, take a breather every now and then and take internal stock of what's going on and how you feel about it. So, okay, questions?
Just wanted to let you know this computer is like, it's not usable.
It's not a computer anymore.
It's not a computer anymore.
Okay.
It crashes like every 30 minutes.
Well, the other day, every single computer in here, like any kind of Adobe program, just froze, and a good chunk of people had to completely reset their computers.
Well, this has gone on for like a few weeks where it just kind of crashes.
When are we getting
Which, like, I have everything saved, so it's no big deal, but like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So actually, that one may be a computer issue. I will mention that one to Livingston so you can get it. It's probably not going to get fixed by the end of the semester, so maybe that one's just the plague computer we avoid. I will say, like, the computers, I think, for the most part, these are only like 2 or 3 years old. I think like 2 years old. The issue is less. Well, so this lab was built later. All of the other rooms are 4 years old.
But he said that they brought the computers in from an old room.
Oh, maybe so. Maybe that's what's going on. I know we had to buy another lab full of computers at one point. I think a lot of what's happening right now, there's some technical issues with the image, like the software on there, and sometimes that's causing. Like, there was a bad graphics driver that was installed or something, and that was causing a lot of Adobe issues and stuff like that. So. Yeah, it's something every semester though, and that's kind of just the world of dealing with machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much until they take over, we're stuck with them. So yeah, and then they'll be our benevolent overlords.
But it's
Hey. No, looking forward to it, y'all. We just get to kick back and watch Netflix movies. So just live in our pods. Okay.
Oh, it's about my model.
But okay, yeah, we'll check that out. Okay, so next class period is our last class period. So a big portion of that is going to be work time, but it's not going to be exclusively work time. I feel like there's I know I harp on it a lot, but I feel like this is there's a lot of decisions coming up in your life, and I want to make sure that, like, I've had people who left this class saying, that was difficult. This probably isn't what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, I mean, that's not true, right? Like, it's all going to be difficult. None of these are going to be easy. And I want to have a little, like, chat with you where basically I'm going to show you some of my early demo reels. I think I showed you my first demo reel ever once, didn't I? Did I show you all that?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's
It was like a
Yeah, so I have a talk I gave at a conference. It's called Everyone Sucks at First, 15 Years of Bad Demo Reels. And it's just my progression so you can kind of see how that happens, how it gets better. On top of some concepts that hopefully will help you deal with, I don't want to say stress, but like that feeling of why aren't I better yet? Why aren't I good at this yet? That everybody kind of goes through in digital media. So it'll be a relatively short talk. It's less than an hour. We'll have a couple more hours to work. To let you know, anytime that you can get into this building is work time for you, right? So don't feel like there's no time that is off limits if you need to be working. Feel free to come in at any time. And over the next few week and a half here, I guess, you're just going to see people camping out here. That's cool. Like you're welcome to, bring that too. But as a favor to your dear friend Greg, take care of yourself, right? Like I know that it's tempting to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna pull 3 all-nighters and everything will be fine, right? Yeah. No. So no, take care of yourselves. Like that is something as you go into this, you don't get more productive. A 16-hour day is not twice as productive as an 8-hour day. So try to get some sleep, try to get some rest, try to manage these last few hours as appropriately as possible. And I'm super excited to see what y'all come up with out of this. So I'll hang around till the next class comes in. If anybody has any one-on-one questions, and we'll have time to get next class period to sort of troubleshoot some stuff as well. So rest of the class is yours. We'll just watch this guy walk around forever.
He's so cute. This is okay. This is gonna be doable to animate because I have a great skin.
So I think it's actually very similar to what you're like. That's okay. No, if you're a little blocky, but I mean that's all right. I think that's.
I need to type it out.
This will work.
Okay.
And then I can send it.
So those blocks for the meetings.
Annotations?
What do you think humans are going to do? Are they going to bend, or are they going to pivot within it?
So I've turned in half of it.
I don't know.
It's like a sponge.
I want to say I'm not sure what.
Can you select one?
These are that's today. Oh, yeah. Probably do need to get
So I think you're probably fine. I'm just like.
sources, so just need a site.
So I just want to make sure you have maybe put a couple more in the just so when it begins, it has enough mesh So the only thing I would say is you can think about knee shapes leg shapes. Any change in that you want to do, you might help a little bit. Like you want to make the top of them a little broader. So if you think about usually it's like a bigger thigh goes down to a slightly smaller foot, and then you expand out for your calves. And so the part that wants to see that upper leg be a little thicker than the lower leg or something like that.
Okay.
But it's not anything nice to me. And you also do it as kind of cool stuff like that. Is it possible?
Yeah, I know the OR and it would be like
Boring
is playing. Yeah.
Genuinely helps me that it makes
Oh, great. I can't wait to be done on it. Sorry, I'm so pessimistic about it.
For everything about it, you find out something. That's another reason to take all these classes, to find out the things that you do.
I don't know.
You gotta let 25.
It's a good weird because it's not wake up.
this would just work this entire leg, and then this entire leg. Now I can get not too far.
There's diamonds in mine from the last one.
It looks like it's the color. Oh, you know,
That's really gonna be. So there's a couple of different ways.
You know what I mean?
So that's my question.
Just have it just go rotate. Like I was thinking of just
Okay, so that's gonna get all done, get my modeling done
as it moves up to the right,
Thursday, and then I can do wrapping.
I didn't think it was gonna be this complicated,
Who
but
drives
Well,
those by just parenting?
this is
Fair.
ungodly.
You picked some very interesting shapes,
Yeah.
and mine is kind of basic
How much time do I
in
put
shapes.
here? This is just connected to the top.
It's weird, it's basic, but
It
it's
won't mess it up.
complex.
Are you
Right.
What I just wouldn't do, I just wouldn't
I'm
scan
just-
the
I'm just
eyeball,
using
I would scan the eyeball.
Relax.
I smooth
Yeah,
mine.
I'm not gonna,
so it's like
I know you overdo it.
Like, I'm using simple shapes, and then
I
wherever
mean,
the
skinny
ball,
is.
wherever
Skin
the
reading.
ball is, wherever the ball is, I just cut
I wouldn't
around
do that to the eyeball, I
whatever,
would just parent it
um,
with the control.
shape
And then you can
fit around
rotate
it.
Because all I really get is like,
Yeah.
So it's like when you get it specifically for the ball, and then I use the disc to fit like
Put that
this.
behind your, yeah, but it doesn't, yeah.
It'll be a pain, but I think I'll be fine.
Well, yeah, what you do?
It sounds like if you did
Actually,
That's an old one. Is that the first one?
It'll be the first, yes, sure.
That's question zero.
So, I have these all, I modeled this all as
Okay.
don't think, Howard, would it be better to leave that texture as separate?
It looks like.
You're telling me?
Okay.
Because when you skin it,
No.
you're gonna have to paint the weights on all one object.
Okay.
Instead of being able to look at this.
we should have like trees. How are you?
Separate.
to the background, like when you're
Why-
out
why
into
are you
like
doing-
the tower.
Oh.
Like here where you.
But
Something.
And oh, it's not so easy. Do you think I should just combine all
Okay, so I
this?
definitely don't need the willpower.
Or keep those all
I
separate?
would think so, but there's not really a
Select
reason
them
to have
all
it.
before you do, do all the same time. Yeah.
For games, you can combine them because you're trying to send it in all one mesh. And like there's, you can do it, it really just makes the scanning a little more complicated since we're not sending this kind of games.
Okay, yeah, because I wanted to be able to.
Or if they have it
just
just implemented in every game.
You find
Yeah, so you know, I would so very similar to what I was telling
That's my
you.
question now.
I'm showing you how to scan this. So you understand. You can always just use it.
We'll see next semester.
And then you can animate this.
Because I have it.
No,
more than eight.
Or you can do that joins to it. Really, yeah. I do too. I actually like
That's
having that
me.
control.
What I just don't know. I know like people don't know what it's gonna be like.
You got a question?
It might change later.
That's ungodly. I have them all separated. So,
You're not classy.
so I wanna do like this part like a color. And like, and this, like area, like I want it.
So five.
Where are you going?
I'm going to my next class, which is gonna start
So, see how it's
It feels like apple.
Yeah.
You just poured it out. You just
Cause I
kept,
just like put them on.
you still
there.
said, oh wait, the gods.
Cut it.
Because I was
Stitch it together.
Yeah.
So you cut that. Cut along and so the other Quick question.
Where you gonna
What
go?
are you doing with the textual colors? Is it all just gonna be solid colors?
I wanted to do kind of what you're doing, but now that I'm listening,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, go for it.
I guess I'll see how long it
I'm gonna
takes.
go cook down.
Yeah, it's probably easier because you can apply solid materials to certain parts.
Yeah.
Like if you just want to select all of this thing here, that was just gonna be like a
Oh,
red
yes.
light or something. You could select all of that and just apply the materials to those spaces instead of like objects. And then you want an object with all the materials on it, and then you can be able to create faces.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So you can always break it up that way too.
Yeah, she's.
For
Yeah, I don't.
and that way you can texture the parts you go into, and then the rest of it can be just like carbon materials or
That was
whatever.
fair. Okay, thank you.
It's the truth.
When in doubt, dollar for you.
Yeah.
I forgive you.
Boy.
Did you have a question?
Yes, I did.
Alright.
Alright.
See you guys later.
Alright.
Trying to completely force the pizza.
Was it?
I bought all the extra and it was like $30.
Alright. I'm gonna watch the videos. I just want to like get the comics of our lady and just
Or order me a pizza
possibly start animating.
that is large and with the mouth we went
So it's
Tuesday.
creative.
Pretty much, either
Enjoy
fuel my, either fuel my addiction of leaving,
Or
or
Feel my addiction
Okay,
of pizza.
so
Take
would I
your-
start with
take the
here
lesser
and
of the
then
two
down, or
evils.
would I start with the toe?
you start
I'm
started
happy
the
either way.
sort of the root, like the chest of the character, whatever, like
Okay.
the and then you would go down each leg.
Yeah, because this is, I wanted to do something funny. I was gonna have it like shrink down, not shrink, but go down and then blow up. It's
I'ma
a
act
demo.
like I'm gonna
like
blow
there's
up.
a game
Act like I
coming
don't
out.
know
So you do some
about it.
sparkles on it?
Maybe.
Explosions?
Maybe. We'll see. Maybe some fire, fluid. I don't know. I want him to make it.
It's like tying it in a knot. You like the modeling part?
Yeah. What I want him to do, I want him to like get a
saw it.
square, like you know that metal that forms into a perfect square. Where you heard it.
Cat.
I want him to do a square and then more tiny cat, and then walk. That'd be really cool.
That's got a lot of it. The morphing part would be, like, you could actually do it.
Yeah.
It would be challenging.
It'd be interesting. That adds
See
extra
my
points.
My boys will.
God, I love walking around and seeing like what people come up with in this class.
I was thinking, I would like. I was thinking after this, take a picture, shoot this over another sheet.
Is there a way to
Pink weights, Sarah. Pink weights.
Who?
What?
Pink who?
No, you said.
We'll watch my episodes.
No, you said Sarah.
Oh, Sarah. Oh.
It's okay. I guess my name is Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank you. That looks really cool. Aww.
It's the goodest.
If you guys enjoyed the good.
What's his name?
Did you?
Yeah.
Arms, legs, head, everything.
Oh, he's pretty. Oh, he's big.
I like the idea of like the
Relax, Tiger. You know you have a lot of work ahead of you. Have you started animating yet? It's not, yeah, I can see it moving. Oh, nothing else? That probably didn't really help. Nah, I just I'm gonna make still find like a little symbol.
I might be able to get it. Or
If I have
Yeah.
probably not.
Only all
Yeah.
boys.
Yeah.
but I don't know if that's.
I'm trying to get the visual effects. I'm just trying. I'm gonna finish that problem.
This is
I
my
have to get the ring done. 'Cause I need that ring done. I haven't done it.
Like
Like what you have,
all
where
three.
you just.
Oh, she's a mommy.
No,
Oh.
that's my cat keys.
You have to do
Oh, right.
And my sister's cat has kittens, and the kids like him more than their turn. Like they would follow him around, and
Wait, how did you use that?
Like an angry couple.
Apple?
And the funniest thing you've ever seen. I really don't like mine.
Yeah.
Now I'm tempted. I'm gonna go try it. It's nuts. I see. Actually, I need to save it. Again. You're showing people your. I didn't honestly didn't know you could. I've just seen some people doing it. I thought it was
I got this giant teddy bear. and he
Good.
loves it, so the shit out of it, like, when it's set.
Oh my god, my cat does that too. He's like, let me
Let's do an auto reg. Probably stack. I want to see how it turns out. I'm curious. Yeah. Or it might just crash.
Wait, did you already do it?
Here's the best one.
Oh god.
Yikes, he gave it arms.
Actually, no, the lens. I just need to move. Yeah, well, yeah. Take off yours.
No, I just kind of like test it.
It is fraud.
It's alright. Apparently, like, it did that good. This needs to go.
There's only 2 legs left.
This needs to go.
I like a robot when
The
you
arms
walk.
need to disappear.
How's Thanksgiving for you?
Sorry. Got busy because of work and stuff. I haven't really been working on my level. I've been working on other things. I'm assuming this is what the class period is now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure these next 2 are just work times.
Yeah.
He's just gonna be here to answer questions and work.
Yeah. I'm gonna be modeling some of my
No.
yeah.
Thanksgiving was kind of standard for me, and I didn't actually get any birthday presents.
Well, I wanted to, what I wanted to do, I really wanted to hang out with my family now and just play games with them because I've been seeing them a lot. But I didn't have time for that because of all my work keeping me busy.
Never any parking.
I played Gears 5 with my dad.
I wish there was parking. If there was parking,
We did play Spring board game. We played board games, we play card games.
yeah, Olympic size
Yeah, we have them, but we haven't
We're going there
like really
eventually.
ones. Like Talisman.
I don't know about
Well, I
that.
only love Talisman, but it takes like 8 hours to play.
Okay, you're.
No, it's not even a joke. It takes a very long time to play, but
That's why I
it's
kind of
so much fun.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's actually.
Walking
It-
games today.
Honestly,
Oh, hey.
I just remember you saying, hey, I'm like,
Oh, yeah. What? Oh, I'm okay.
Then where are you gonna keep going?
Fine,
Oh.
I
thought you liked 4 legs, but it's even better now using 2 legs.
That is very cool. Yeah.
Is that just supposed to be a Terry Bogard jacket? Oh wow.
Oh, I mean, maybe.
Yes, you do.
Shut
Shut up.
I like the part of it.
It ain't actually that bad. That's-
Wait, are the eyes? Oh,
They're in the train.
Yeah.
Are you gonna make them go
Do you know
fly?
the board?
$1 million?
I was playing, I didn't really like it because I just got candy. So I turned around and seen a candy.
Yeah.
My friend. I mean, and I just imagined it from his view, and he was laughing his ass off because I didn't know they did. And when I turned around and tried to throw a spear at it, it fell off anyway without me touching it and killed itself. Nice. And I'm like, oh, that was great. And it was a boss too, which is even worse. Like the group leaders, you know, about to get with the clubs. He killed himself. He didn't want to do it. Like Razor, but
Here's what I'm saying to do. Make sure you just put
Do you
it
play
on
the
there,
Sims?
like if you
Ah,
package at the end, like environment model.
It took me a bit to get that.
Because you'll have to do a little work when you import that in, it's probably not gonna come in.
Yeah, I don't know how it's.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah.
It's an FBX file.
Yeah, FBX will do it in my edit, it
Oh.
may not come in perfect.
Like,
I was really debating.
And you just say environment, you don't have to add security to somebody that didn't work.
Yeah, he's experimenting with VR right now.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
I did the periphery.
Oh, that thing, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Where are you going?
Weird stuff.
Why? Oh, sorry. No, I was just. Sorry. I actually haven't. It's just the last day. I have time to go to the
What?
Already be ready to work.
Yeah, I my feet are like 3-prong. So like as 3 prongs, and then the long one's in the middle, and then the 2 little sides. So I just cut off mine pretty much, and just made a toe that can give it balance. And I'm not gonna do it. They're gonna be angry. Hey, welcome back.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm okay. Want to join?
Oh, good now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. I'm gonna make a lot of.
Oh, fuck. Want to join us? I'm talking to myself. I know. That's pretty good. I don't understand my talking. Where are we going? Are we going now?
Have fun.
See you. Bye. If you guys are here later.
I honestly think I'll make a cool thing a little bit.
So it's basically turning it.
But I do have a long time.
So the cool thing about the tip rig is that although it works, it's got this neat feature where you can pull it out and the character kind of follows. Some people like that. Yeah, it's pretty well.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's just gonna be weird.
I think it was just set this I think it's anything that's stiff.
I mean, I know.
That's pretty neat.
So
You saw mine, that was just kind of
it's like
expensive.
the mode of this
Oh, big
control.
way.
And so if this is
My second.
that means it'll work in if you can still pose the character.
That's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
I've learned my lesson now, but
So that'll work too. If you just want it. Actually, it's
Everything I wanted to do,
it's
just
if you
do
want it
this
to be
do.
okay.
Just like there's supposed to be another dimension down.
This is like
That's
rotate blend.
same to the door that opens
I
up
try to
the
make
part of the
as much
So it's
interactive.
like,
Oh, that's rotate transit.
walk over one that opens that door to go down further and cuts it off and basically make it less. It just didn't work.
Yes.
It's tailored. Making sure this
Both on Google.
I've got a double.
I was on
yeah, that's cool. So the only issue you're probably gonna have is maybe a little bit of skill issues.
For me, I've got the basis down.
So it's one of the things with the quick rig is it is a quick automatic way of generating a rig. Usually it's used for like background characters and stuff. You can add stuff to it. I don't know how. I mean, I could go around or I think there's maybe a way you can use it.
Yeah, and then I need all the help I can get.
Like, is that working if we rotate it?
No idea.
Stick around, we're going to that.
Good
luck class on Monday. Monday, Tuesday.
It actually kind of works with something. Yeah, I think the skin wave is so you can do this thing. This way is not just so they want to kind of get the skin wave down.
I'm so excited for me and my friend.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, my idea is trying to get a second hand so I can
Cool. Yeah, you guys still need to put a little bit of weight on it, and that's cool. Nice. I wish I fixed it. So modeling is kind of what you're leaving for? No, sure. Yes. Yeah, cool. Did you model it from scratch? Or nice.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully when it finishes. What did it say?
It's not done right, right?
No. That was good.
Oh, so it's trying to make it like as high definition as possible.
Yes, that'll make up for that.
That's cool. I like it.
Either, so I have to like go how long do I?
Yeah.
Make these wider, so fix that issue. Not even.
Basically, you know that mountain train? I literally have to add some home, that's $20 for me. Spend $15
I'm not
and
so.
use $5 for food.
I'm like, yes.
Yeah, it's,